So, good morning. Today we will be discussing about the finite element formulation of a particular type of partial differential equation, that is a parabolic type partial differential equations, where the unknown not only depends upon the spatial coordinates x, y and z, it also depends on time. So, the new part here is basically to take care of this discretization in time. Alright. So, in that case we will be using the finite difference approach to discretize the solution in time domain, and the earlier approach of finite element method to discretize the solution in the spatial domain. So, let us look at today's governing differential equation. So, for this case I will take an example of unsteady heat conduction problem in 2 dimension. Alright. So, we have already discussed this equation under steady condition, alright, where there is no change in the solution with time. So, as earlier the del dot q, okay, so that denotes the divergence of the heat flux, okay. So, it is one sense the amount of energy coming into the system through that point, alright. So, we have used minus of del dot q. So, it means that the energy going away from the system through that point, alright, plus the heat generation R at that point in the domain, alright. So, the net amount of heat that is staying there at that point is equal to the rate of change of temperature times rho Cp, alright. So, in this case it is the rho stands for the mass per unit area and C stands for the specific heat. So, the amount of energy that is staying at that point is utilized in increasing the change in temperature of that material around that point, okay, with time. Now, Q for this particular problem, because we are talking about the problem in the 2 dimension. So, Q has 2 components, alright, Qx and Qy. So, these are basically the heat flux in the x and y direction. So, as I said earlier, it is basically the rate of heat flow per unit area, okay, in x and y direction respectively. So, this Qx and Qy, okay, is related to the temperature gradient, okay. Here the u, the unknown variable, is basically representing the temperature field, alright. So, this Q vector, heat flux vector, is related to the temperature gradient using this conductivity matrix. So, this is basically the Fourier heat conduction law, alright. So, Q is equal to minus kappa times gradient of u. Now, in a isotropic material, as I said earlier, so isotropic material, we can say that kappa is basically the conductivity, which is a scalar, suppose, okay, say k bar, times the identity matrix, alright. So, in that case this kappa times gradient of u becomes kappa bar times gradient of u, alright. Now, let us keep the heat flux vector as it is. Now, what we will do? We will first obtain the residue. So, for the problem in hand, the right hand side minus left hand side give rises to lambda times u dot. So, here this rho into C, that has been denoted as lambda, okay, and del u del t is represented as u dot. So, time derivative will be represented with dots and spatial derivative will be represented with subscript, suppose u comma xx, alright. So, this represents the derivative with respect to x, and dot will represent the derivative with respect to time. Now, so the right hand part is lambda into u dot. Now, the first term in the left hand side is del dot q, alright. So, these are all vectors, that is why they are represented in bold letters, minus r, the heat generation term, alright. So, heat generation per unit area. Now, once we decided the residue, alright, then what we do? We multiply the residue with a arbitrary weight function w, alright, and integrate it over the whole domain and make it equal to 0. So, that is what is weighted residual approach, alright. As usual, we are multiplying the residue with an arbitrary weight function w, integrating it over the whole domain and make it equal to 0. Now, in this case the residue is not only a function of x and y, it also depends on time t, alright. So, at every time instance we are doing the same thing, r times w integrated over whole domain is equal to 0. Now, if I multiply r with w and integrate, okay, over the whole domain, so what we get? The first term lambda u dot into w, that is here as it is written. So, del u del t is basically u dot, alright. So, lambda u dot w, that is the first term that we got from here, alright, and the last term, that is r into w d omega integration over the domain, that is basically minus r w d omega. So, that is written in the right hand side here, r w, okay, this should be d omega, alright, fine. Now, only the term that is left is basically del dot q. So, we have integration over del dot q into w d omega. So, I will write it here, I will write this as integration del dot q, alright, into w d omega, integration over the domain is equal to 0. So, as usual we will write this as del dot q into w, alright, d omega, okay. So, this is small w, okay, minus integration omega gradient of w dot q d omega, alright, because this is equal to this plus this, alright. So, that is why we are writing this. Then this first term is basically the divergence of this vector field, q is a vector, w is a scalar function. So, this divergence of this vector field integrated over the domain, that we can write using the Gauss divergence theorem as the normal component of the vector field, okay, into ds integrated over the boundary of the domain, alright, minus this part remains as it is, or we can write del w dot q, and what is q? Q is minus kappa into gradient of u. So, then this becomes plus, we got kappa, alright. So, you can write as it is gradient of u integrated over the whole domain, alright. Now, next what we will do? Now, we said that w is an arbitrary function, okay, except that wherever the u is defined, w has to vanish, alright, or w has to be 0. So, in the Dirichlet boundary, w has to be 0. So, in that case, so this integral, okay, will be only over the Neumann boundary, because in the Dirichlet boundary the integrand becomes 0, alright. So, this term has appeared in the right hand side, alright, because q dot n, okay, q dot n is basically representing the scalar qn, alright, the normal heat flux, okay, at a given point. So, that is qn times w as it is, alright. Since it is taken in the right hand side, so there is a minus sign here, alright. Now, this term kappa gradient of u, so dot del w, so that has been written here as it is, because a dot b equal to b dot a. So, that is what has been written in the left hand side integrated over the whole domain, alright. So, this is basically the weak form is basically the weak form, alright, because initially we had del dot q and q contains gradient of u. So, we had second derivative of u. In this case we have only gradient of u and gradient of w. So, the continuity requirement has decreased. Okay. So, this has been discussed earlier. Now, this part actually is known to us already, only the new part for the problem in hand is the first term in the left hand side, okay, that has come because of the time derivative of the unknown function u, alright. So, this is how we derive at the weak form. Now, one thing I must mention is along with this partial differential equation we have to have conditions like initial condition and boundary condition, alright. So, initial condition we will define as u for all x and y at time t equal to 0 is suppose u 0, alright. So, that can vary with x and y. So, that is basically you can say the initial temperature distribution in the domain. So, that is the initial condition, alright. In addition, so in the Dirichlet boundary we will specify the temperature. So, u del omega d, alright, in the Dirichlet boundary is specified and suppose this is a 0, okay. This need not be a constant, this can be a function of x and y on the boundary, it can vary, but that is defined. Similarly, I can have Neumann boundary condition. So, I will say q n on the Neumann boundary omega n, alright, is equal to V naught, alright. So, these two are the boundary conditions, alright. So, now let us go ahead and see how we can deal with this weak form in presence of this time derivative of u. Now, here I have written the weak form as it is, okay. So, from here we will start. So, weak form of the governing differential equation in hand. Now, earlier what we used to do, we used to say that we will discretize the domain with triangular and quadrilateral elements and we will write the expression of u as sum over the basis functions, alright. So, we will write alpha I phi I. So, that is what is our earlier approach. So, in that case phi was defined, okay, as a function of x and y. So, piecewise we define those phi i's and we actually look for the alpha i's which were constant and were representing the nodal solution. Now, in this case since the solution is varying with time, alright. So, in this case these alphas, the nodal solutions will be offered as a function of time, alright. So, we will write u at x comma y comma t is alpha j which is a function of t times phi j which is the same basis functions or piecewise polynomials that we already discussed, alright. Now, then how to represent w? So, we will follow the same strategy. We will say that we want to use the Galerkin approach and we will use the same phi I that we use to represent the primary variable u. We will use the same phi i's or the basis functions to represent w. So, if I take w as one of the phi i's, then I will get the ith equation. So, that is the strategy. So, let us go ahead and replace these expressions of u's and w's in this weak form and find out the corresponding discrete equation. So, what we will get? If I substitute here alpha j phi j, alright, here phi is a function of x and y and alpha is a function of time. So, we will get alpha dot phi j, alright, and since alpha is only a function of time, so it has nothing to do with the integration over the spatial domain. So, in that case we will write alpha j dot phi j. So, that is obtained from the del u del t, alright, and w has been substituted with phi I. So, this is the first term, alright. while substituting u as alpha j phi j and w as phi I. Similarly, in the second term, when we replaced alpha j phi j, then what we got, because this is the derivative over x and y, alright. So, this is a gradient of u and gradient of w. So, in that case we will get alpha j gradient of phi j. So, we will get alpha j gradient of phi j and w substituted with phi I. So, we will get gradient of phi I, alright. So, everything else remains as it is, fine. And in the right hand side, w has been substituted with phi I, alright, in both the terms. So, we have heat generation term times the phi I, here we have the normal heat flux term times phi I, integration over the Neumann boundary, alright. Now, this term we have already seen, or this term also we have already seen in the steady state heat conduction problem, alright. So, only the thing is, here instead of having alpha j, we have alpha dot j. So, that is basically d alpha dt. So, these are basically d alpha j dt, alright. So, now the first term, if I refer as c I j, alright, the integral, only the integral part, if I write as c I j, the second integral part, if I write as k I j, alright, and the right hand side, if I write as f I, because it depends on phi I only, then the ith equation that we got can be represented as, this can be represented as c I j alpha j dot plus k I j alpha j is equal to f I, alright. So, this is the ith equation, this is the ith equation, fine. So, since the j is repeating, so you have a summation over j, and here also we have a summation over j. So, this is exactly this equation I have rewritten, okay. Now, the expression forCij's are given here, Cij, Kij and Fi, fine. This we need afterwards when we will try to find out these Cij's and Kij's and Fi's, alright. So, in this case we have taken w as one of the phi i's. So, if I change I, okay, from 1, 2, 3 to n, so there are n number of basis functions representing u, alright. So, if I change I from 1 to n, so I will get n such equations, okay. So, those set of equations I can write in the matrix form as k times alpha plus c times alpha dot is equal to f, alright. So, if you remember, earlier we used to get k alpha equal to f, okay. So, there was no time derivative, okay. Since this partial differential equation contains the time derivative, so that is why the discrete form, okay, also is having this alpha dot term. Now, in earlier case we had only set of linear algebraic equation, but whereas here we have a set of ordinary differential equation, alright. So, now we have to discretize the alpha dot, okay, like we have to write alpha dot in terms of alphas at different time instances, alright, and obtain the final discrete form, okay, which is valid for at certain discrete points in the domain and is valid for certain discrete time intervals in the time domain, alright. Now, so here you just need to understand that earlier we had to solve only one equation, that is k alpha equal to f, and that is also we have to do it once, okay. But here we need to know the solution, okay, over the whole time domain, okay. Suppose this problem I want to solve as time varies from t0 to tn, alright. So, I need to know how the temperature distribution in the domain is changing with time. So, I need to know the time variation, I need to know the temperature variation, okay, over the whole domain as time proceeds. So, instead of finding the solution at all possible time instances, So, what we will do, we divide the time domain, okay, of interest into some intervals, alright, and we will obtain the solution only at those particular time instances. Suppose this time domain has been divided into n number of parts. So, I will first find out the time solution at time t equal to t1, then we will obtain the solution at t2, then t3 and so on, alright. So, instead of having the solution for all possible time instances, we have to basically find out the solution at certain time instances, okay, in the time range of interest, fine. So, now let us see how can we do that. So, in this case we will take help of the finite difference approach, okay. The finite difference approach, we can write the time derivatives as the difference in values, okay, at certain time instances. So, here I have written one such expression here, as you see, 1 minus mu times alpha dot at n, okay. What does this mean? The superscript n here denotes that alpha dot at time t equal to t n, okay, as I said earlier. So, I am looking for the solutions at certain instances. So, t n is one such instances, okay, or one such time instant, okay. Similarly, alpha dot at n plus 1 is basically representing alpha dot at t equal to t n plus 1, alright. So, we will write alpha dot at time t n, okay, that is written as superscript n. So, 1 minus mu times alpha dot at time t n plus mu times alpha dot at time t n plus 1 is equal to alpha at time t n plus 1 minus alpha at time t n divided by delta t n. So, what is this delta t n? Delta t n is basically the difference between t n minus 1 and t n, alright. So, as I said earlier, the whole time domain has been divided into some intervals, okay. So, we start with t naught, okay, we obtain the solution at time instant t equal to t 1. So, this is delta t naught, alright, the time step. So, okay, we will refer as time step. Then we will try to find out the solution at time t equal to t 2. So, this is we will denote as delta t 1, fine. So, this is the next time step. So, with the solution known at time instant t n, we will try to find out the solution at time t equal to t n plus 1, okay, by taking a time step delta t n. So, that is what is the meaning of this, alright. So, this is the time step, okay, and this is the instant t n where we know the solution already, and this is the time instant where we want to find out the solution, alright. So, that is how we will proceed. So, we will start with n equal to 0, okay, we will first find out the solution at t 1. Once we know that, then we will put n equal to 1. So, we will move to time t equal to t 2 and find the solution and so on. So, that is what is called time marching scheme, alright. Now, here this mu is basically a constant. Depending on the choice of mu, okay, we have different integration rules, alright. So, if I say, if I take mu equal to 0, alright, then what we get? We get alpha dot at time instant n is equal to alpha at n plus 1 minus alpha at n by delta t n, alright. So, this is called forward rule, okay, forward finite element finite difference rule. So, this is Euler forward method, alright. So, I am finding out the time derivative, okay, from the value of alpha at some forward time instant t n plus 1, okay, minus alpha at t n by delta t n. So, that is what is the forward time difference scheme. Similarly, if I choose mu equal to 1, then I will get alpha dot at n plus 1 is equal to alpha n plus 1 minus alpha n by delta T n, alright. So, this is backward rule. I am at T n plus 1, I am finding out the rate from the alpha at the previous instant alpha n, okay. So, that is why it is called backward rule. So, mu equal to 1. So, depending on the choice of mu, as I will be discussing later, we can have different scheme and each of them are having advantages and disadvantages, alright. So, then what we will do, we will write the equation, discrete equation that we got by discretizing in the spatial domain, that we will write at two different time instances T n and T n plus 1. Let me go back. So, this is the equation that we obtain, okay, and this is valid for all time instances, okay. So, if I plug at, if I write the same equation at time t equal to T n, so I will refer each of the terms, okay, by a superscript n, okay, which refers all the variables or parameters corresponding to time t equal to T n. So, I am writing the equilibrium at time t equal to T n. Same thing, the same equation we are referring by this superscript n plus 1, which denote that I am writing the equilibrium at time T n plus 1. So, we have written both n and n plus 1. Now, choosing mu equal to 0 or 1, I can actually use one of them and can derive the final discrete form, but our intent is to keep mu as it is, okay, and find out the final form, discrete form, and then we will plug different values of mu, okay, and see how the schemes are different, okay, that we can always look at. So, that is why we will take the generalized form, okay, of this finite difference scheme and we will plug them in this expression. So, equation A I will multiply with 1 minus mu and equation B I will multiply with mu and I will sum it up. So, that is what has been written here. So, there is a assumption here that C at n plus 1 is equal to C at n and is represented as C. So, we have assumed that C is not changing with time, alright. Even if we do not assume, then also we can actually calculate the final discrete form, but in general case, since rho C, okay, if I assume that it is not changing with time or say temperature, alright. So, in that case we can assume this matrix C, okay, as independent of time, alright. So, under that assumption, okay, so with this simple algebraic manipulation, what we will get? We will get something, okay, times alpha at n plus 1 is equal to the modified force term, okay, which contains the force at both n and n plus 1, okay. This corresponds to not actually the force, it corresponds to the heat generation term and the Neumann boundary term, okay, and those can vary with time. So, this term, as you can see here, it contains both the terms corresponding to the time instant T n and the time instant T n plus 1, alright. So, that we can actually obtain, and we have another term here, okay, which contains C and K at n, okay, the stiffness matrix corresponding to time T n times the solution at time instant n. So, this is the new thing, okay. So, earlier if you remember, alright. So, in that case we did not have a time derivative. So, we only solved for the solution for a given load, alright, in one step, but here we have to increase the time in steps at an every instant we have to look for the solution, but in finding out the new solution we also need to preserve the previous solution alpha n. So, alpha n plus 1 we can obtain, okay, from this modified force term and another term that is associated with the previous solution at time instant t equal to T n, alright. So, this modified discrete form, we are writing this matrix the C plus mu into delta Tn into Kn plus 1, that we are writing as K bar. So, this matrix, and this matrix we are representing as K double bar, alright. And this F which contains both F at n and F at n plus 1, this we are representing as F bar. So, delta Tn into this, that we are representing as F bar. So, this is what we have written in short, alright. So, we can actually now solve, okay. We can invert K bar. Obviously, we have to enforce the boundary condition before that, Dirichlet boundary condition, but in this case the point is the solution at Tn plus 1 I can obtain from the solution at time t equal to Tn, alright, and the force term corresponding to n plus 1, okay. But it contains both, it contains the force contribution at time t equal to Tn as well as the contribution of the force vector corresponding to time Tn plus 1, alright. Now, if once I have this, so what we can do, we can start with n equal to 0. So, n equal to 0 means this is corresponds to the initial condition, and initially we know the temperature distribution. So, we know alpha n, okay. So, at all the nodes we can actually find out the temperature at time t equal to T naught, alright. So, from there we will find out the solution at time t equal to T1, alright. So, we will get alpha 1. So, that is the first time step. Then we will plug it in here and we will obtain alpha at time T2, alright, and so on. So, that is what we have to do recursively and find out the solution at all time instances from T0 to Tn, alright. Now, let us see, alright, say how we can implement it in a given code and how we can find out the solution. But before that we need to understand what are the different numerical schemes by which we can simulate the solution, alright. So, as I discussed, so this is the different scheme that we have utilized here, and as I said, this mu is a parameter. So, we can put different values of mu and we can arrive at different numerical schemes. Now, as I already told, if I choose mu equal to 0, okay, so that represents forward difference scheme, alright, and it is found to be conditionally stable, okay. So, in a short while I will discuss what is conditional stability, unconditional stability and all, and this scheme order of accuracy is of the order of del t, alright. Similarly, if I choose mu equal to half, alright, so in this case if I choose mu equal to half, as you can see we have both the term alpha dot and alpha dot at n and alpha dot at n plus 1, alright. So, but in this case this scheme is found to be stable and the accuracy is of the order of delta t square, which is pretty good, alright. Similarly, if we choose mu equal to 2 by 3, we have a method called Galerkin method, okay, which is again stable and of the order of delta t square. Finally, for mu equal to 1, okay, which is called implicit method or backward difference scheme, okay, which is stable, alright, but of the order of delta t by 2. Now, so now let us understand what is meant by this stability and order of accuracy, alright. So, first I will discuss about consistency of a numerical scheme. Now, as you see, the time derivatives, okay, are written in terms of the values of those variables at different time instances, alright. So, obviously, in this process we are actually neglecting the higher order terms, alright. So, obviously, those higher order terms are going to contribute in terms of errors. Now, as delta t becomes smaller and smaller, if those error become smaller and smaller, then we say that this scheme is consistent, alright. So, that is what has been defined here. If the error, okay, tends to 0, as delta t tends to 0, alright, then that numerical scheme is said to be consistent. So, as you choose smaller and smaller time step, your error becomes smaller and smaller. Okay. That is what it means by the consistency of the numerical scheme. Now, I will talk about stability. Alright. Now, stability basically, the stability of a numerical scheme is basically a measure of the boundedness of the approximate solution with time. So, what does it mean? Suppose at a given time step your error in the approximate solution. So, what is error? Error is basically the difference between the true solution or exact solution and the approximate solution. Now, suppose at a given time instant your error is, suppose I quantified as 1, then in the next time step the error got multiplied by 2 and the error become 2. Then another, in next instant the error becomes twice of that, so it became 4. So, what happens at every time instances your error is getting multiplied by 2. So, your approximate solution is getting far away from your exact solution, alright. So, your error, okay, is actually increasing with time. So, your approximate solution obviously with time will blow off, alright. So, it will go far away from the exact solution. So, your approximate solution will not be bounded, alright. So, if for any delta t, for any time step your numerical scheme is such that for any time step if your approximate solution is always bounded, then it means that the numerical scheme is stable, okay, or you can say unconditionally stable. But if there is a limit on delta t, suppose your numerical scheme says that you cannot increase delta t beyond 0.2, alright. It means that when your delta t or time step is less than 0.2, then your approximate solution remains bounded. But if your time step increases more than delta 2, then your solution will blow off. So, in that case, so your approximate solution will not be bounded. So, this kind of scheme where there is a limit on delta t, okay, under which only you will get a bounded solution or approximate solution. So, that numerical scheme is called conditionally stable, alright. So, conditionally stable means you have a condition on delta t, okay, below which if you choose the time step your numerical scheme will give a solution where the approximate solution is bounded, alright. So, let me go back. So, as you see here the forward difference scheme is conditionally stable. So, it means there is a limit of delta t, okay. So, we say delta t is less, should be less than delta t critical, okay, and this delta t critical can be obtained in terms of the largest eigenvalue of the problem in hand, alright. So, I will not go into that detail, but you just keep in mind that delta t you cannot increase as much as you want for conditionally stable scheme. You have to keep delta t smaller than delta t critical. But what about the stable scheme? As I said here, these three schemes are actually stable. It means they are conditionally, unconditionally stable, alright. So, it means that they are unconditionally stable. It means then there is no limit on delta t. So, you can take time step as large as you want, okay, but your solution will always be remain bounded. But does that mean that from starting from t naught can I obtain the solution directly at Tn? It is not so. Why? Because in that case your solution will be inaccurate. So, it means that, let me go back. So, what is accuracy then? Accuracy is basically the measure of closeness between the approximate solution and the exact solution, alright. So, if you even if your numerical scheme is stable, if you take delta t large, your error will be large, alright. So, your error remains bounded, but error you will be large, okay. So, your approximate solution will be inaccurate, alright. So, that is what it meant by accuracy. So, as I said, the forward difference scheme you have an order of accuracy of delta t. It means if you choose a time step of 0.1, your order of accuracy is in the order of 0.1. If you choose in this case say Crank-Nicolson scheme, if you choose a delta t of 0.1, so your order of accuracy is 0.01, which is pretty good. So, because generally we choose time step in the 10 to the minus 10 to the minus 3 to 10 to the minus 6. So, in that case your order of accuracy will be in the range of 10 to the minus 6 to 10 to the minus 12. Alright. So, your numerical scheme is stable and it is accurate of order of delta t square. So, generally we prefer Crank-Nicolson scheme. Alright. So, this is what is meant by consistency, accuracy and stability. So, your numerical scheme is stable, it means you can take larger delta t, but the delta t is governed by the accuracy. Alright. And conditionally stable means you cannot go beyond a certain delta t, okay, otherwise your approximate solution will become unbounded. Alright. So, now before going into the code, I will just show you the flow diagram, okay, how you should follow the code. So, first we need to define the material data. This part we have already discussed many times, okay. While developing a code, you must actually first write algorithm, okay, you can say pseudo code in your own language you can write, okay, where you need to define the problem, okay, with the material data, with FE data and mesh data. Mesh data means you need to define the coordinate matrix, the connectivity matrix, the boundary condition type and all those things. Now, for this problem in hand, we have to define, in addition to all those, we have to define the initial condition, and the initial condition is basically the nodal values, okay. We have to feed the nodal values. If I go back, if we go back, here you see we need the solution at alpha n, so at t n. So, it means that we need the alpha values, the nodal solutions at time t equal to t naught, and that we have to extract from the initial condition. Alright. So, that is the new part here, and in addition we have to define the boundary condition. Now, in addition what we did, we defined the values and the derivatives, okay. So, it should be derivative, alright. The derivatives of the ni's, the derivatives of the ni's, the values and the derivatives of the shape functions we have to define at the Gauss point, alright. Then what we need to do is, here what I have done is we have defined u at t1, means at first time instant, it should be t naught, okay, because I am starting from t naught. So, u at t naught, okay, we have assigned the values from the initial condition, that is what I refer as alpha at t equal to t naught, you can say, alright. Then what we need to do, we now run a loop over time instances, alright. This is the new part, because earlier problems does not depend on time, alright. We solved it only in one step, we applied the load and we solved the set of equations, alright. But here at every time step we have to formulate the set of algebraic equation and we have to solve, and the set of algebraic equation depends on the previous solution. So, we cannot actually jump. So, because at every time instance, in order to formulate the set of linear algebraic equation, I need the solution of the previous instant, alright. So, we have to do it in steps, and at every step we need the solution of the previous instances. So, that is why there is a loop over time, alright. So, as I started from t1, that is why it runs from 2 to n. If you start from t naught, it should go from 1 to n, okay. So, accordingly you need to modify the range of I, alright. Then, so this is the time loop, okay. So, the extreme for loop, so that is the time loop. Then what we will do, we will loop over all the elements. So, this is the procedure that we have already done. So, we will loop over all the elements, we will calculate the element stiffness matrix, the contribution of the elements on to the C matrix, this is the new part that we have to calculate, and we also have to calculate the force vector term, okay, contributed by each of the elements. That will arise because of the heat generation term in each of the elements and the Neumann boundary term. If any of the edges of a given element is coinciding with the Neumann boundary, then we have to integrate over that boundary, and that contribution will be added to the element force term. Alright. Then what we did, once we calculate it for a given element E, we just have to add it or assemble it to the global stiffness matrix. So, this is the global stiffness matrix, you can say global K, this is global C and global F. Okay. And why there is a suffix I? Because I is basically over the time loop. Okay. So, we are doing it at every time instances. So, that is why there is a subscript denoting that it corresponds to that particular time step. Alright. So, once we calculate the global K, C and F, then what we need to do is we need to find out the K bar, C bar and F bar. Alright. So, now let us go back and see why it is so. As I said here, you see from this, so this is K bar, okay. So, this is K bar, so that needs C as well as K at n plus 1, and here I have K bar, K double bar, okay, which needs C and K at n, alright, K at n. So, this is what I meant, I wanted to mean, and the whole part here delta T times this we denoted by F bar. So, these three K bar, K double bar and F bar. So, that is what we need to calculate from K and C. So, it should be K double bar, okay. So, K bar, K double bar and F bar. So, these are the three things we need to calculate considering mu and delta T, because those expression contains delta T n and mu, alright. So, once we obtain those modified matrices, then what we will do, we will enforce the Dirichlet boundary, because that is what we must do, alright. So, we have to enforce the Dirichlet boundary, then we can actually solve the set of algebraic equations, alright, and find out alpha n plus 1. Finally, now we can visualize, okay, at a given time instant we can actually see how the temperature is varying or how the heat fluxes are varying, alright. So, with this I will just open the code, okay, and I will discuss some details, okay, how this can be incorporated for a very small problem, alright. Here we have taken a small domain, alright, okay, it is a square domain, alright. So, the coordinates are 0 0, 1 0, 1 1 and 0 1. So, in this domain we tried to solve the unsteady heat conduction problem, alright. So, for this problem at the boundary we have assumed that the temperature, okay, for all T, okay, the boundary, the temperature for all time instances is equal to 0, okay. So, this is for all the edges. So, you say Dirichlet boundary condition, okay, and at the center of the domain, okay, in a circle of radius say less than 0.5, okay, there is a heat generation term. So, in this case the heat generation term G, okay, which is a function of x and y, is defined as 1, okay, for time less than 0.2, alright. So, we have taken in a particular portion of the domain, okay, the heat generation term as 1, okay, and this remained on, okay, this heating element remained on for time t less than 0.2, okay, after which G becomes 0, alright, for t greater than 0.2, alright, and the whole simulation has been done for 0.5 second, alright. So, heat generation term we have defined, the Dirichlet boundary, in this case there is no Neumann boundary, all the edges are having temperature at 0. So, initially it is at 0 degree temperature. Suddenly this heating element started heating the domain, okay, which is defined as 1 for time t equal less than 0.2, after which this heating element got switched off. And we want to see how the temperature in the domain is changing with time. Alright. So, in this case we have taken 8 elements in each along each edges. So, there are 64 elements in the whole domain. Alright. So, we have already checked the convergence. Alright. In this type of problems, your error basically depends both on the time step and the element size h. Alright. So, delta t and h you cannot just arbitrarily choose and expect a solution to converge. Alright. So, first I will explain the code and I will show you how we can actually visualize. So, first we have defined the kappa and lambda, the conductivity and the lambda term that contains the rho times the specific heat C. So, that we have defined. Here you can actually define them as a function of x y also, but for the time being we have taken them as 1. Alright. Then we have defined the Dirichlet boundary as 0, because as I said in the problem all the edges are kept at temperature 0. Alright. Then we define the FE details like the degrees of freedom per node and the shape functions. So, as you see we are using quadrilateral element with degree p equal to 1, it means we are using bilinear shape functions. Alright. We have 4 nodes per element and we have 1 DOF per node, that is the temperature in this case. Alright. So, the nodal degree of freedom per element becomes the node per element into the degree of freedom per node. Alright. So, these are all the things that we already have discussed. Then we define the integration points and the corresponding weights for 2D and 1D integrations. Then we calculated the derivatives and the shape function values at those Gauss points. Alright. Now, next what we do, we already have refined the mesh sufficiently for the problem in hand. So, I will not do the refinement steps, rather I will do it for a given refinement. So, we have chosen refinement step. Okay. So, we have actually 64 quadrilateral elements. Alright. So, that means that we have actually 81 unknowns in the problem in hand. Now, initialize the global stiffness matrix and the global C matrix, okay, Cg and Kg. Then we run a loop over elements. As I said earlier, we will run a loop over elements. Here the thing is that the material parameters, that is the conductivity term and the term that is lambda, that is equal to rho Cp, that does not change with temperature or time. Alright. So, we are actually calculating the stiffness matrix and the C matrix, okay, before the time step, because this will remain same for all time instances. So, instead of doing it over each time step as I described in the algorithm, so what we can do, we can calculate it beforehand, we do not need to calculate at every time step. So, here we are calculating the stiffness matrix and the C matrix. So, in this case as you see this is same as whatever we had, did in the earlier problems. We initialize the element matrices and the element force vectors, alright, because we know that number of degrees of freedom per element. We can find out the x and y coordinates of the nodes of the physical element, alright. Then we run a loop over Gauss points, because we are calculating it numerically. We will find out the Jacobian using the derivatives of the shape function in the master element and the coordinates of the physical element. Then we calculate the determinant, then we calculate the derivatives of the shape functions in the physical element corresponding to the Gauss point, that is dn bar, alright. So, now after that we calculate the conductivity and the lambda at the Gauss point, because lambda and kappa can be dependent on x and y coordinate, as I described at the beginning of the code, they have been offered as a function of x and y. So, that is why at every Gauss point they have to be calculated, alright. But in this case these are constants, but we have kept a provision that in case you need, you actually can make use of it. So, you have to calculate each of them at every Gauss point. Then there will be a loop over I and loop over j, okay, varying over the degrees of freedom, and then we will be calculating the element stiffness and element symmetrics. Now, in this case, as you see, what is the element C matrix or K matrix? Let me go back to the slide and find out the expression for C and K. So, here as you can see, C I j is basically rho C phi I phi j. So, rho C is basically lambda. So, lambda phi I phi j, whereas K I j is basically the kappa times gradient of phi I into gradient of phi j. So, this is the dot product of gradient of phi I and gradient of phi j. So, let me go back. Here as you see, kappa times the gradient of shape function, ith shape function, okay. So, we have taken the transpose of it and multiplied with the gradient of phi j, okay. As you see, this is the gradient of phi j times the determinant of j into the weight, So, this is the Gauss weight corresponding to the Gauss point P, alright. So, the whole term that is actually at Gauss point P, so that is added to K I j, alright, and this we are looping over I and j. So, it is continuously getting added. Similarly, for the C matrix, we have lambda at the Gauss point multiplied by the shape function I, okay, at the Gauss point P, and similarly the multiplied by the shape function j, okay, shape function j, as you see here, shape function j at Gauss point P multiplied by determinant of j into the weight corresponding to the Gauss point P, alright. So, this we are looping over P. So, we are actually at the end of this loop, we are getting the element stiffness, element K matrix and element C matrix, alright. Then before ending the loop over K, what we are doing, we are assembling, okay, following the same strategy. So, once this ends, at the end of this loop, as you see, this loop runs over K equal to 1 to n elements. So, once we come out of this loop, we are getting the global K matrix and the global C matrix. So, as I am again repeating, the K matrix and C matrix we are calculating before the time steps, as for the problem in hand we are assuming that rho C and kappa, they are not changing with time, alright. So, we are calculating it once. Now, we will go into the time step or time loop, alright. So, initially we started with t equal to 0, we have chosen delta t as 1 by 500, alright. Then and we have chosen the whole simulation time to be 0.5 second, okay. So, this is the information that we need. Then we have defined the old solution. So, U old is basically denoting the old solution, that is the temperature at the previous instant. So, that is U old, alright. And at the beginning we have to obtain the nodal values, okay, corresponding to time t equal to 0 from the initial condition. So, that is what has been used here, and since the temperature is everywhere it is 0 for the problem in hand. So, we have just declared it as a 0 vector, alright. So, U old is basically the previous solution, alright. Similarly, F g, because F bar, the modified force vector term that contains F n, F at time t equal to T n. So, that also we need to store from the previous instances, and at the first time step we need F n, and in this case F n is actually 0, alright. So, because our heat source term and the Neumann boundary term are absent at time t equal to 0. So, that is why F g at the beginning at time t equal to t 0 is 0. Then we have chosen Crank-Nicolson scheme. So, that is why I have defined mu as 0.5, alright, and now we are running a loop over m. So, what is m? M is basically the time loop, okay. So, we are increasing the time, okay, till the time reaches the end time, and the end time is 0.5, alright. Now, what we will do, as I said earlier, at every time step we are going to solve the problem and find out the solution, and that we will store, okay, because in the next time instant we have to use that solution as well as the force term, alright. So, here as I said at the beginning of this time loop, I define the global force term as 0, alright, because that has to be calculated, alright, at every time. That corresponds to f n plus 1, okay, f at time t equal to t n plus 1. So, that has been initialized as a 0 vector. Then we run a loop over all the elements just to calculate f n plus 1, because that changes with time. So, that has to be again calculated, and here we have used the numerical integration scheme. So, we calculated the Jacobian similarly for all Gauss points, and we obtain the heat generation term. Since there is no Neumann boundary term, only the heat generation term has to be calculated in the f term. As you see in the slide, the Fi depends on the heat generation term R and Qn. Now, for the problem in hand, there is no Neumann boundary. So, only the R term, okay, that has to be calculated, and because that is what is going as f n plus 1. So, if I go to the next slide, that f bar, okay, contains f n and f n plus 1, and this f n plus 1 has to be calculated at every time instant, okay, and f n is basically the previously calculated f, alright. So, that has been, so this is the term R, you can say, okay. Here I have defined this as a function of x and y, and the problem in hand we have defined that in a given circle, okay, within the domain there is a circular portion where the heating element is getting on and off, alright. So, that is why it is a function of x and y, and I need to evaluate the heat generation term at in each of the elements, because somewhere it is 0, somewhere it is 1. So, that is why we have defined this heat generation term as a function of time t as well as x and y. So, for the Gauss point we are calculating the heat generation term, okay, G naught, or you can say R, and then what we are doing, we are multiplying R with the ith function, because the term contains R phi I d omega. So, that is why this is R, this is phi I, okay, ith function, and this is the determinant, that determinant of j that came because of the mapping, alright, times the weight at corresponding to that Gauss point P. So, this is exactly that thing we are doing for numerical calculation of Fe, okay. So, at time instant t n plus 1, alright. Once we calculate Fe, then what we have to do, we have to calculate the new global force. So, that is what exactly has been done here. As you see, we calculated the corresponding global number, alright, from the connectivity matrix, and we simply added the element force term, okay, and we got the new global force. So, the new global force corresponds to time t n plus 1, old global force vector that contains time t n. Both are required to calculate f bar, alright, and that is what has been done. Now, f old has been calculated. So, the at current instant whatever is f new is basically will be used as f old in the next time step, alright. So, at every time step only one force vector has to be calculated. Now, once it is done, now we are calculating the k bar and k double bar, okay. So, as you see, if I go back, k bar contains c plus mu into delta t n plus k at n plus 1. In this problem in hand, k does not depend on time. So, it becomes c plus mu delta t n into k. Now, let me go back and check. So, the global or modified k is basically c plus mu into delta t into k, okay, exactly same term, and right hand side contains the force term at n plus 1 instant plus some other term. So, let me go back here. So, the next second term here is c minus delta t into 1 minus mu into k at n, alright. So, in the code, let me show you this part, alright. So, here is the term. So, c minus 1 minus mu into delta t into kg, alright, into the old solution. So, that is the second term in the right hand side. So, that has been written here, alright, and the first term in the right hand side, that is 1 minus mu times f old f at n and mu times f at n plus 1. So, these are the two terms into delta t, okay. So, with this we got the new right hand side and this is the new left hand side matrix K bar, alright. Now, once we do that, then what we did, the newly calculated f, that is f at n plus 1, as I said f at n plus 1 has to be used as f fold, that is f n for the next time instant. So, that is why we have assigned f g new, because f g new will not be used anymore, we have already taken care of it in the modified f matrix, sorry, f vector, alright. So, that is why we are actually assigning this newly calculated force vector, that is at n plus 1 to the old force vector, okay, and that will be utilized in the next time step. Okay. Once we get that, then what has to be done? We have to apply the Dirichlet boundary. Now, in the problem in hand, all the edges are actually subjected to the Dirichlet boundary part, alright. So, then what we have to do? We have to assign the corresponding degrees of freedom as 0 for all time instances, alright, and it can vary also, okay. I can define them as non-zero. So, here in this case we have taken the homogeneous Dirichlet boundary condition for simplicity. So, and it has already been discussed earlier. So, once we take care of the Dirichlet boundary, then what we will do? We will try to solve, alright. So, in this case we have used the backslash operator. So, f g by k g, that gives us the solution. So, this solution is at n plus 1, alright, and then what we did? We assigned this newly calculated solution as old solution, because that will be utilized in the subsequent time step. So, we have assigned this u as u old, alright. Then we have increased the time as t plus delta t, because we are moving from t at n plus 1 to t at n plus 2, alright. Then just to visualize the midpoint of the domain where the temperature is maximum, we have actually noted down how it changes with time, because the iterator, or you can say the loop m, actually tells us the time step, alright. So, that is why with m we are actually saving the maximum temperature at the midpoint of the domain, and we are also noting down the corresponding time, so that we can actually see how the temperature at the mid of the domain is changing with time. This is just for visualization, alright. Then we are also storing u in this variable z, okay. So, just for visualization purpose. So, here actually the time ends, okay, till the time is less than n time, this process will continue. As soon as it reaches the end time, it will stop, alright. Then finally, we are plotting this temperature of the midpoint with time, and we are saving the data, alright, for visualization purpose. Now, let us go ahead and run this piece of code and see how actually the temperature is changing, okay, in the mid of the domain. So, here I have already started running. So, here as you see, okay, up to 0.2 second, okay, the temperature at the mid of the domain is increasing, okay, fine. And then as I switched off the heat source, okay, from 0.2 second onwards, the temperature starts dropping, okay, and it reaches the ambient temperature, or say 0 temperature at time 0.5, at time t equal to 0.5, alright. And as you see here, since the initial solution I haven't stored in that variable, so that is why corresponding to time t equal to 0, it is not showing the temperature, okay. With a small modification we can actually append that information, and it will show as 0 at time instant t equal to 0, alright. Now, in this case, if I plot a surface plot, like say suppose I want to see how the temperature is distributed in the domain, okay, at a particular time instant. So, we can make use of the post processor that we already developed in the steady state heat conduction problem. We can use it and actually see the temperature variation in the domain. With the evolution of time, the temperature distribution also changes in the whole domain. So, it will be better if we can put those figures in a sequence, okay, as same as that of the time step, and actually can visualize in the form of some animation or video. We can visualize how the temperature is evolving in the domain with time. Alright. Here I have developed a small video. Okay. In MATLAB you can actually make small videos, okay, based on your figure. Okay. There are a lot of tutorials, or even the MATLAB personnel involved, they also show you how to develop a video from a set of simulation results. Alright. So, here I have developed a small AVI file, okay, just to show you how the temperature in the domain is evolving in the time, okay, as we switched on and off the heat source tab. Alright. So, as you see, the temperature initially is increasing, okay, with time up to 0.2 second, and then as the time becomes more than 0.2, then this starts decreasing, and initially it was 0 and finally also it becomes 0. So, let me run it once more. Alright. Here it seems like we have used triangular mesh, but actually we have taken quadrilateral mesh, but for visualization we have used trisurf. Okay. There is a command in MATLAB. Okay. So, that is why it seems that the domain has been discretized using triangular elements, but it is not so, it has been discretized using quadrilateral elements. Alright. So, you can actually develop a similar video, okay, based on your simulation results, and you can actually show how the temperature evolves with time. Alright.